Hi, my name is Melanie, and I wanted to tell you about the dramatic means that God went to get my attention and to bring me into Him. Um, it's an amazing story of obedience and disobedience at the same time, and so I wanted to share that with you. Um, this story starts about 5 years ago. I was living in Atlanta and seemingly had it all. I had a career that I loved. It was very lucrative. I had an amazingly fabulous lifestyle with travel and great house and great husband, 2 kids, just looked like I had it all. In fact, I was doing so well that I didn't need God. I had it under control. Everything was just fine. I didn't need God. Now, I was raised as a Christian, and I knew better. But my husband was agnostic. And while I never went so far as to be agnostic, I'm embarrassed to say, let God take a serious backseat in my life. And I just called him when I needed him. But I didn't need him very often because I had it all under control. Well, God started getting my attention, and true to form, subtlety doesn't work with me. So he tried a few subtle ways and just didn't work. So God began stripping. And it started in Atlanta. It started with the economic crisis and the crash, and my husband's company closed, my bank closed, and all of a sudden there's no money. And so it started with financial ruin, and we had absolute financial ruin. And so in that, we decided to move to Black Mountain, North Carolina, and get out of Atlanta, get out of the city, move to Black Mountain. So we did that, and we're really excited to be here. And there's no question God put us here. Put us here. There's just no question. So starting a new life here, and I found out about just a few months into living here, I found out that my husband had been having an affair for 3 years with my best friend back in Atlanta. So all of a sudden, I was just devastated, just absolutely devastated. And, so now there's financial ruin on top of this, and just, I didn't know anybody, I didn't have a network here. And my family kept saying, please just come home, come back home. And I just knew that I was supposed to be here, but I didn't know exactly why. So as this progresses, I go through a year of about 6-7 months of just intense suffering. But God sent me this amazing church and these amazing godly people who just started swarming me and just started ministering to me and teaching me and bringing me back to God. And it was a really cool time because my faith was truly childlike, in that all of my education and knowledge of the Bible was from my childhood. And so it was a really neat perspective to be an adult but you're reading everything kind of fresh and learning it from an adult's perspective in a very fresh way. So it was a beautiful time of growing with God. But at the same time, I was so angry, and I understood the concept of forgiveness, and I understood that we were supposed to, and I also understood that it's not optional, that Jesus doesn't suggest we forgive others. He tells us we need to forgive others. But I just couldn't get there. I could not get there. And I was so angry, and just kind of holding it together by a thread, but at the same time, getting closer and closer and closer to God. So I guess God decided I needed some more prompting, and so just a few months into that situation, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, and it was a very rare, aggressive breast cancer, and breast cancer isn't typically aggressive, but mine was extremely aggressive. And that obviously rocked my world. So all of a sudden, then I'm dealing with that too, and dealing with that, and then it's a strange thing about cancer is that when you're diagnosed with cancer, everybody in the world, it touches everybody, and everybody has been touched by cancer, and it brings out the best in people. They want so badly to help. Well, so one of the ways in which everybody wants to help, especially initially, is to give you information. And my phone was ringing off the hook every day with, don't do chemo, do this natural thing. you've got to call this doctor in Michigan that my sister-in-law used, and you have to do this. You've got to go to Duke. You've got to go to Chapel Hill. You've got to go to Mayo. You've got to go to MD Anderson. You've got to go to the cancer centers. This is where you need to go. This is what you need to do, and you need to talk to somebody. Oh, you've got to read this, and you've got to eat this, but don't eat that. Eat all this, and don't eat that. And so my head was about to explode. I mean, it was just information overload. But what I realized is that I can't control this. All that built up for me to say, I cannot control cancer. I can't manage this. I can't run this. This is not something that I can make a plan for, assess the situation, make a plan, execute it, and be done with it. This is way beyond my control. And as I hinted, I had a big habit of being pretty confident that I was controlling everything and running everything. So about a week or so, maybe 10 days into my diagnosis, all I knew at that point was that this wasn't good, that it was very aggressive, and that the typical treatments for cancer don't work, that everything they knew to do does not work for my type. Well, I was about to go to bed one night, and I got a text from a dear friend, just a scripture. It was just Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. And it was just the perfect thing that I needed to hear, that you're not controlling this. What you need to do is be still. That's what I need you to do, and you just let me handle it. And I stayed up, I think, that whole night, and I just prayed and prayed and prayed. But I made peace that night. I really digested and thought about, okay, I really might be dying. So what does that mean for me? Let's don't forget what it means to everybody else for now, my children, my family. Let's think about what it means for me. And I really got that, hey, if it's my time to go, woohoo, yay, let's go. And I just got really peaceful with that if it's my time to die, I get to be with the Lord. Yay. And so then I just kind of wasn't scared anymore. And so I woke up that morning and I was in a totally peaceful place in that I'm done. I'm not going to try to manage this. This is beyond my scope. I get that. It's 100% God's show to run. He knows how this is going to end. And I'm either going to battle cancer for a little while and die, or I'm going to beat this. But either way, I'm going to be okay. And I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I'm not going to try to control it. I'm not going to try to run the show. I'm going to be obedient. And I just prayed, God, if you'll just show me the way, if you'll just open the doors for me, I'll walk through them. You show me your direction, and I'll walk through them, and I'll do it peacefully and faithfully. And I absolutely did. My entire cancer journey, I absolutely did that. The very next day, my oncologist calls and said, hey, as you know, I've been trying to do some research and figure out what we can do. And there is a study out of Chapel Hill that is thrilled with your diagnosis, thrilled to have you in our study because you're young and healthy otherwise, and they have a protocol that they think may work. And they said, would you want to do it? And I just laughed. I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you, God. That couldn't be clearer. I appreciate that. And so I started that and started a really brutal treatment, chemo every week for 5 months. So it was brutal for 5 months. And then I had surgery, and my tumor was huge. It was about the size of a baseball. And when we knew it was shrinking, obviously, and we knew that things were going well, and I knew my oncologist was really happy. But when we got to the point of the surgery, the surgeon had to call the doctor in Chapel Hill from surgery to say that they can't find the tumor. They couldn't even find the shrunken remains of the tumor because they were supposed to send it to Chapel Hill for pathology. And so, you know, when I come out and meet with my oncologist the next day, he was giddy. He was absolutely I seriously thought he was going to do like a little toe touch or something. And I said, so what does this mean? And he said, your tumor is gone. I said, well, that's awesome, but what does this mean? Like, what's the prognosis? What does that really mean? And because I hadn't asked questions like that because I didn't need to know, honestly. But now I'm like, okay, now I think I need to know. Maybe I'm going to make it through this. And so I made an appointment with the doctor in Chapel Hill. In the meantime, I start radiation every day, and my radiation oncologist was an amazingly godly woman and just a godsend. And so I go to Chapel Hill during that space, And I remember the date. It was May the 9th, 2011. No, 2012. Sorry, 2012. May the 11th, 2012. I just said that wrong. May the 9th, 2012. And I go to meet with the oncologist, and, the long story short, I basically was like, what does this mean? And she said, well, I wouldn't have been so blunt with you as I will be now, but when your case was presented to us, we ranked you as having an 80 to 85% chance of recurrence within the first 2 years. And I said, well, what would a recurrence have looked like? And she said, well, unless we had something new, we couldn't do anything for you. I said, so you expected me to battle cancer for a year or two and die? And she said, yeah, that's statistically where we ranked you. And I said, well, what about now? And she said, well, you had a complete response to treatment. We rarely see a complete response. And she said, so now you have a 5 to 10% chance of recurrence ever. She said, and that's the same as the public at large. You're done. You're done with cancer. You're done with this cancer. And so I just left there, and I was almost in a state of shock then, because when I say I turned it over to the Lord, I did. I didn't think about it. I didn't live in fear. I didn't deal with any fear. But now that I was on the other side of it, I kind of had to experience a little of the fear. I had to let it in just a little bit to really understand how close I had come and how, what all this meant, basically. And in that space, I realized immediately that there's no way that God spared my life for me to be an angry and bitter and hostile woman. That's not at all the point to this. And I have got to give this up. I've got to give up this anger. I have got to let it go. I have got to find the path to forgiveness. So I started just praying with all my heart, please take this from me, God. Please, I would just pray constantly, take this. And in my mind, I had a vision of me holding one end of the rope and Jesus holding the other, of just tugging. And I would pray, please pull harder, take this from me, please. And I prayed and prayed and prayed. And that following Sunday in church, I go to Christ Community Church, and I love it. And I go to the early service, which is the more modern music and praise music. But every now and then they'll slip in an oldie but goodie. And we sang I Surrender All. Well, I was raised a good Southern Baptist, so trust me when I say I know every stanza of I Surrender All and Just As I Am. Never missed altar calls. So as I was singing I Surrender All, I got it. It just washed over me. I had to sit down, literally, that I get it. God's not going to take this from me. I've got to surrender it. I have to let go of the rope and throw it up to Him. I surrendered the cancer to Him, and I got to watch Him work a miracle. And I'm keeping Him from saving me in this because I'm holding on to it, and I've got to let it go. I have to throw the rope up and let go of it. So I got that loud and clear, but I still didn't quite know how to do it, but I got that I've got to do this. So I was just in a space all day of just, okay, wow, this is a big breakthrough. I don't know what to do with it, but I knew it was big. Well, that afternoon was our annual church picnic. And so I was at the picnic, and I was talking to 2 or 3 men of the church who had been really instrumental in mentoring me and being there for me. And I told them what had happened, and they said, well, let us pray for you. And so they started praying for me, and then we were kind of going around the circle, and it was my turn, it got to me, and so I was praying, and in the middle of my prayer, I interrupted myself. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, God, hang on, wait a minute. And I just stopped the prayer, and I was like, you're going to make me love them, aren't you? You are going to make me love her. That's the path. You're not going to give me just ambivalence. I've been praying for ambivalence. You're not going to do that. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, be ambivalent toward your enemies. It says, love your enemies. And I'm like, oh, I have been praying for ambivalence, and I'm not going to get that. I said to my friends, I was like, He's going to make me love her, isn't He? And they just smiled knowingly. They're like, now you're getting somewhere. I'm like, I don't want to love her. Loving her is dangerous. Loving her is painful. Loving for her wasn't trustworthy. I'm going to have to do it, though, aren't I? And I just stunned. And I need to kind of interrupt saying, I think women get this more than men, that the betrayal from your husband was brutal, but I'm not without blame there. that's, I certainly played a role in letting our marriage deteriorate until to get to the point that something like this could happen. So her betrayal was 10 times harder to take because I had never done anything to her to deserve anything like this. And so her betrayal was just so much more painful. And I, struggling with that, and I just didn't want to love her, but I realized that I had to. Well, it's a couple of days after this, it was on a Tuesday, get in my car, and just as I get in, Chip Ingram is signing off on his radio program. And I'm like, I hate I missed him because I love Chip Ingram. And then I thought to myself, as soon as I get to the office, I'm going to go to his website and see if he ever comes anywhere in the Carolinas because I would really like to see him. And I would make a point to see him. He comes back on the radio at that exact moment and he said, "Thanks for joining me today. And I'd love for you to join me at the Cove this weekend where I will be speaking on letting go of a painful past." I almost stopped the car. I'm like, "Really, God? Really? Thank you for dumbing this down." I live 11 miles from the Cove. I'm like, and Chip Ingram is going to be in my backyard speaking to me on letting go of a painful past. I'm like, "God, thank you so much for dumbing this down. Thank you." So I go to the office, I call the Cove, and there was still availability in the seminar. And I said, "Well, how much does it cost?" And they said, "It's $275. Now, I need to say that I had just returned to work. I hadn't worked in 10 months because I've been battling cancer. So, money was a huge issue, and I just didn't have it. And so they heard me kind of pause a little, I guess she sensed that and said, "Well, would you like to apply for financial aid?" And I was like, "Yes, how does that work?" And she said, "Well, we'll send you a form." So they sent me the form, and on the form, one of the questions it asks is, "How much do you think you can pay?" So I looked at my finances, and I was like, "Okay, I could scrape up 100. So I put down 100, and then I put, and they said, in essence, "Why do you need to be here?" So I wrote a little bit, and then I flipped over, and I wrote all over the back, and I just told as concisely as I could my path of obedience and disobedience at the same time, that I had concurrently been completely disobedient with God and obedient at the same time with two issues that were so huge. They both had the power to take my life, both literally and figuratively, one literally, one figuratively. And that, God had shown me what he could do, but I just still was hanging on and just wouldn't let him show me what he could do for me in this regard. And it's like, I've got to end that. And so, put that in writing. So I get a call the next day from the administrators at the Cove, and they said, "We've got you all registered, you're all booked, and we're giving you a full scholarship." And I'm like, "I guess you are." I guess you were like, "Bless her heart, she really needs to be here." So I was excited to come to the Cove. That was a Tuesday. The class started that Friday. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so I just finished up radiation that Friday. And so I was just exhausted. I mean, it was not a good time for me to be here physically. I was exhausted, and every little break we got, I'd go lay down somewhere, and I had no hair, and I had on a scarf, and, just very much looking and feeling and acting like a cancer patient at that time. And but I just knew I was supposed to be here, and I was thrilled to be here. So I was in prayer the whole time. I'm like, "Okay, God, you've got me here. What are we going to do? This is going to be big. You've gone to great measures to get it through my head that I'm supposed to be here. So let's go. All right, Chip, what do you got for me?" So Friday night was great, and it was powerful, and I enjoyed it. Saturday, same thing, great and powerful, and I enjoyed that. Then, but nothing big had happened. But nothing, no big breakthroughs. So it's Sunday morning. And I'm driving here. Again, it's a 10-minute drive. And I'm like, "Okay, God, let's have something. Now, you got me here for a reason. What are we supposed to get out of this? I haven't gotten anything. I mean, I've gotten some stuff. It's been great, but let's go. We're on a schedule here." And I'm laughing as I'm praying because that's so me to tell God what our schedule is. And I'm like, "I know that you're really running the schedule, but I'm just reminding you, we got 2 hours here, 9 to 11. This is it. Let's roll." So I'm laughing as I'm praying, just laughing at how stupid I am, but I don't care. And so I get here, and as they're about to do the introduction, or before Chip comes on, the MC says, "Chip has asked that we take a couple of testimonies, and we'd like to get a couple of testimonies, just about 5 minutes." And all of a sudden, my hand flies up, like just flies up. And I had never given my testimony to that point. I look up at my hand like, "What? Stop." And it I just couldn't believe it. Well, he didn't call on me. So I put my hand down and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. And so they asked for another testimony. My hand flies up again. And I'm going, stop it. I'm just like literally going, God, stop it. What are you doing? I didn't get called on. I'm like, phew, thank goodness. But I'm starting to think, okay, how on earth would I tell anything about my story in 5 minutes? They asked for a third testimony. My hand flies up and they call on me. And I just was like, okay, I have no idea what to say, but I can just say that the Lord just put the words in my mouth, and I was able to present my story in a concise manner, which is not my strength. and after I was done, Chip was sitting just a couple of, he was sitting in the audience still at that point, and he walked up to me and just thanked me for giving my testimony. And I thought, wow, okay, well, sure. I don't know really what to say to that, but I'm glad it was that you got the point that I was trying to make. And twice during his sermon, he referenced my testimony. So I just felt really dialed in, like God was really speaking to me very specifically. But again, no big breakthroughs, no big aha moments. So it's over. Chip's done. And he asked us all to stand up, and they just started playing some praise music. And and Chip just said, you guys just stand up and just pray and see what God opens up for you. Well, I have to stand up for this part because it's kind of strange. Well, if you've ever been to the Cove, it's in the auditorium, it's on an incline. So you're already standing at an incline. And of course I have on heels because I may be next to death, but I promise you I have on heels. And so I'm standing there in heels, and all of a sudden, I've got my eyes closed, and all of a sudden my body starts doing this. And I'm doing this really weird rhythmic motion that's just unnatural, because if you're swaying to music, you're going side to side or something, you're not doing this. And I kind of felt like I was a chicken bobbing my head or something. It was bizarre. And so my eyes fly open. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, all right, Lord, now I want you to help me here, but don't make me look stupid. And I don't know if it was the voice of the Lord at that point or my own good sense to say, hey, you prayed for this, you've asked for it, go with it. So I closed my eyes and I immediately started doing this rhythmic thing again, and it just was so strange. But I'm going with it. And so I sit there, and then all of a sudden, as clearly as I'm seeing this chair, as clearly as I'm seeing this rug, as clearly as I'm seeing you, I saw myself standing in my ex-husband's yard. And he and my ex-friend were standing on the porch together, arm in arm. And I had never seen them together at that point. And they had been very gracious about that. And so I'm looking at them and just racked with pain. And then I turn and look and do a 180. And standing under the tree in his yard, right where my children's chairs are and their little playthings, I look over and I see Jesus. And he's standing there just as plain as day. He looks all Jesus-y, the beard, the robe, the sandals, just totally Jesus-y. But everything about his countenance and his carriage was something like my friend would relate to me, like very modern, very just dialed into me. And he looks at me and he goes, and I turn and look at them again. And I turn and I look back at Jesus, and he's like, come here. And he's kind of laughing like, you can, in my mind, I'm like, he's going, stop being so stubborn. Would you just come here? And I look back at them a third time, and then I looked at Jesus, and he's like, come here. And I just ran to him. And when I ran to him, it was a physical contact. I don't know what else to say. I felt him wrap his arms around me, and I just felt his presence, and he looked at me, and he just kind of turned me away from them, just turned my back to them, and he held my hand, and we started walking away, and he pressed his face into mine, and he said, I'm proud of you, girl. And I just felt this amazing love and peace. But then, and this is the strongest part of all for me, because this shows how much God knows me personally, how I am written in the palm of his hand. We're walking hand in hand, and he goes and butt flicks me, and I do it right back instantaneously. Well, I do that to my children all the time. We are constantly doing that. Every time we get near each other, we butt flick each other. And I just started dying laughing. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just kicked Jesus. Now, I know I'm a relatively new student of the Bible, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to do that. I'm pretty sure that nowhere in Scripture does it say anytime you need to, just go in and kick Jesus. So I was just laughing. But then I got it loud and clear. That's how well he knows me. That's how well he knows that that's what I do with my children and with people I love, that just the silliness, just the relaxed. And I got that that's how much he loved me. And so I left the Cove that weekend, just totally transformation. And I needed to sit in it for a while because I didn't want to be, I just wanted to live in it for a little while and sit in it for a little while so that it just wouldn't be false. And then about 2 weeks after that, I called my friend and I invited her to my house. And our thing was always to get together for tea, and we talk about our kids and talk about life and talk about our husbands and our relationships and our problems and our fears, and it was always over tea. And so that was really personal for me. And I called her and I invited her to tea at my house, that I needed to talk to her. And she was scared at first. She was like, can I ask is this going to be good or bad? And I said, well, I've learned karate. And but it was the first time that I could ever joke with her again, that I was relaxed enough that I could do anything personal, make even the slightest, let my guard down to even just be silly. So I invited her over for tea. My children were there, and they knew I told them what I was going to do, that I was going to offer her my forgiveness. And so it was really cool that they got to see God working and God's path through this, God guiding me through this. And so she came over and we chatted for a few seconds, and then I just told her that I'd forgiven her, and that I loved her and that I forgave her. And I meant it. I felt it. It was just this outpouring of love. And she just cried and I just cried, and she just, told me that she was so sorry. And I'm like, I know that you are. And I forgive you. And it was unbelievably powerful. And it was so clear to both of us that it was beyond me. Melanie wasn't capable of that. I'm capable of a lot of things, but I wasn't capable of that kind of forgiveness and that kind of love. And I got it. I got it in that moment, that it's only through God. It is only through Jesus. And I looked back, and just as I reflected over it, that I laughingly, I look back at the extreme measures that God has had to go to get my attention, and just go, gosh, I'm so hard-headed. And but I laugh about it, and I just I'm so appreciative, because the way I envision it is I think of my time in the Cove when I was there in that moment, and all prayed up, as I like to say. I was all prayed up and had a lot of people praying for me, and as I have had so much of this journey. But the way I envision God just looking over at Jesus going, son, look at her down there. She is so stubborn. She is ridiculous. Would you just go get her? Just go down there and get her. I've tried everything at this point. Just go get her. I've taken everything away from her that I can take away. Just go get her. Just go down there and get her. And that to me is the most incredible vision, because it's like, that's how much he loves me. That's how much he loves me, is that there was a moment in time that the world stopped and I had Jesus' full-on attention, and he came down here to get me. He came down to say, honey, look at that and look at me. Come with me. I've got this. I'm good. This is good. That's toxic for you. This is good for you. And it just was the path to my forgiveness and for peace. And I'm now almost 2 years out of cancer. The magical 2-year mark is 1 month away. I'm still cancer-free. I feel great. I feel normal. I'm living in forgiveness. It flares up. It is true what they say, that forgiveness is a gift you have to keep giving. You have to keep. But the good news now is that when I have flare-ups, I can get in the Word and get over it so quickly. A day and a half, I can just pull it right back in and not live in that. And that's only through Jesus. And that's my story.